Well, welcome everybody. Dr. Pompa here by my lonesome, but I'm here with a great guest with a great topic. Dr. Christina Bjorndal, and that's a mouthful for a dyslexic like myself. However, this topic I think is a wonderful topic. It's regarding mental illness, which, by the way, we've had so many requests for more information on a show like this. So we found the expert herself, and I believe the biggest reason she's an expert is, well, wait till you hear her story. But Dr. Christine, she completed her doctorate in naturopathic medicine from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. So we have another Canadian amongst us. She's considered an authority in treating mental illness, such as depression, anxiety, bipolar disorders, and eating disorders. So those are some topics that absolutely you all wanted to hear from. So we brought the expert. And having overcome her mental illness and challenges, Dr. Chris is a gifted speaker and writer in this area. I believe we all become the expert because of our personal stories. And she's written and authored a few books, one of which I have right here, Beyond the Label. And she's also authored another, The Essential Diet, which you'll find out is also in this book. So this is the one you want, and it's her latest book. But The Essential Diet I love, because you said it, Dr. Chris. People would say, well, what do I eat? And then you said, okay, here's this part of it. But, I really want to start with your story because, that's really how I'm here, right? I mean, I became an expert in what I do, not because of my years of schooling. It wasn't. It was because of I suffered. And you have to tell your story, because I feel like when I talk about this subject, people are trapped. They feel trapped. And I think one of the reasons I'm passionate about this topic is because I believe that psychotropic drugs are some of the most wicked medications that ruin lives. I mean, look, I'd argue there's a time and a place, right? I mean, I'm not going to, knock down every use of a psychotropic drug, because there is no doubt a time where people need some crutches. But I believe it's not an answer to this epidemic. So tell us your story and how you got here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, first of all. Yeah. And I just want to speak to that. I just want to say that, I'm alive today because of pharmaceutical and psychotropic meds. But listen, I thrive because of naturopathic medicine and chiropractic medicine and alternative medicine. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what we want people to be doing in their lives, right? We want people to be thriving, not just surviving. So, absolutely. So my story, really it actually begins in utero. I'm adopted, and so and I open my book with a discussion about the neurological and emotional imprinting that happens in utero. And I don't want women to go to that place of shame and blame. That's not my intention by mentioning that, but I think it's just important to sometimes go that far back to really understand the whys of the circumstances.
I have to stop you there, because you probably haven't had time to do a lot of digging in some of the lectures. But generational toxicity is actually something that I teach on. As a matter of fact, at the Bulletproof Conference, that was my topic. And basically the message is it's from the womb to the tomb. And I talk about 3 toxins that start in utero. Well, 2 of the 3, and there's a story there as well, but that we're getting exposed to in utero, and it's affecting 4 generations. So from the womb. So on this show, we totally get what you're saying. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I'm just going to say, Christiane Northrup talks about how we're the culmination of the 7 generations that have gone before us. And so that's why I loved your talk so much, because that's, we speak the same language. So basically, I was adopted into a very loving family, and things were going fine, but I always had this core belief and sense of a little bit of anxiety and trepidation in my childhood. But I also became an overachiever, which I think is a result of this core belief that I had, which was I wasn't wanted, which is faulty, but it's how I operated in the world. Mm-hmm. And that served me very, very well until it didn't serve me anymore.
That's right. Absolutely.
Right? And so I developed an eating disorder in high school, which started fairly innocently. But, and also an interesting side note, prior to the eating disorder and all the mental health challenges that spiraled thereafter, I did a year of antibiotics for acne. So again, taking a case is really important. And I didn't make that connection with my mental health until I was researching my book. Started about 8 years ago. So anyway, that's another interesting, there's a huge relationship between the gut and the brain and the concept of the bacteria that we have in our digestive tract. So basically ended up in university and found myself in a state of depression and anxiety. Now, I didn't know that that's what I was experiencing because I didn't understand that. Nobody in my family had been depressed, so those words were never used. Ended up at the UBC Student Services and I was put on a psychotropic, an antidepressant, a tricyclic antidepressant at that time. This is in the late 80s. And I took that, and basically within 4 months after starting that medication, I then had a full-blown delusional psychotic manic episode. Took 2 police officers, 2 ambulance attendants, my mother and my boyfriend at the time, to wrestle me into a straitjacket. Off I went to the hospital, where I was then left in a rubber room, injected with haloperidol, a very powerful antipsychotic medication, to come back to reality. I was then given the label or diagnosis of bipolar disorder type 1. So I hadn't digested the first diagnosis yet of depression and anxiety. I had been masking my eating disorder, and I now had this other label to swallow, which I did not like at all. This was, again, in the late 80s. So there was no conversation going on in the media about mental health as there is today. And I'm happy to see that conversation is there now, but I really think we need to shift from talking about it to what are we doing about it? And so my book is an attempt to bridge the gap between these 2 professions that very much do not always support each other. And it's not, I'm not saying that it's this or that, i.e. Western or natural. I'm saying it's this and that. If we're truly going to get people well, you need to bring naturopathic medicine to the table, as well as chiropractic medicine. So I basically continued my overachieving tendencies, graduated university valedictorian, went to work in the corporate world, was told to not tell anybody by my psychiatrist about my mental health condition, because business can be cutthroat, and I'm working in the financial world with money, and as people may or may not know, sometimes with mania comes excessive spending and things like that. So I walked through the world wearing the mask that everything's okay on the outside, but I'm not doing so well on the inside. Right. And for that decade, from 1990 to 2000, I had no mania. I had basically was riddled with depression and anxiety. So much so that I had a suicide attempt in 1994, which left me in a coma with kidney failure, on dialysis, waiting for a kidney transplant.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, when I came out of that coma, I can tell you that, you know, I certainly wasn't happy that I was still here. I had to, you know, I refer to that actually as a spiritual crisis, because I tried very hard, right? And so why am I still here? And so a friend gave me a book to read by Marianne Williamson called A Return to Love. And in that book, she has a passage, a quote on surrender, which goes like this: surrender means the decision to stop fighting the world and to start loving it instead. And it is a gentle melting into who we really are. It is a letting down of our armor and allowing our Christ-like self to be seen. And so I reflected on that, as well as this other research that I read about, which was this research on 2 groups of AIDS patients. One group was accepted and loved by their family and community, and the other group was shunned because of their homosexuality. And they studied the lifespan and prognosis of these 2 groups. And not surprisingly, the one that had the love and the compassion and the acceptance of who they were and their condition did much better than the other group, right? So what that opened my eyes to the fact that I shunned and disliked bipolar disorder. And therefore I shunned and disliked myself, which led to all the self-hatred that I was experiencing and why I didn't want to be here anymore. So I realized then that I need to start loving myself. And how do I go about doing that? And then, I went to see a naturopathic doctor, and then I went to see Dr. Abraham Hoffer. He's they refer to as an orthomolecular psychiatrist. He's a medical doctor, but basically he prescribed nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started me on a nutritional protocol with supplements. And I then had my first year where I was free of depression and anxiety. And it was shocking to me because I hadn't felt that way for so long.
Right.
And it was just, but nobody talked about my diet. I didn't eat very well still, right? I mean, I was a corporate person. It was, takeout and not a very healthy diet. And I was also driving myself really hard on the exercise front. I was a Ironman triathlete, and so I was really burning the candle at both ends. So basically, by this time, I reported to a CEO as well, highly overachieving. So what ended up happening was I asked myself one question: if money didn't matter, what would I be doing with my life? And I certainly wasn't doing what I was doing. And the answer that came to me was to go back to school. And I had to go back to high school at 33 and become a naturopathic doctor so that awesome. You can help people. So here I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Especially in this area, I mean, you are the expert because you really have been through it. Holy cow, what a story. So in your book, you talk about some myths,
yes.
about mental illness. Talk about some of that, because I think that's really important, because I think that there's a lot that's not understood. There was a lot, beyond the label. I mean, the labels ruin people's lives. And in your case, I mean, you bought into it too. I mean, right? I mean, you labeled yourself and hated yourself for the label. So what are some of the myths?
So one of the myths is that you cannot regain your mental health. One of the myths is that you have to take this psychotropic medication for the rest of your life. And I think because I'm adopted, I never had the benefit of the genes to be able to look to my left or my right to say, oh yeah, that's true. This runs in my family. Mm-hmm. So I didn't accept that statement. Hey, you need to take a mood stabilizing medication, whether it was lithium. There's been so many, Lamictal, valproic acid, Tegretol, for the rest of your life. And I sought and I really looked for other answers. So that's one myth. Mm-hmm. I talk about, there's 21 or 23 myths that I've came up with in that chapter. And in fact, that book, that could be a book in and of itself.
Yeah, I don't expect you to go through all of them, but some of them hit on some of the big ones, right?
So that's a big one. I think the other big one for me was that not a great idea to have children, because this is supposedly a genetic condition that you will be passing on to somebody else. It's not the greatest experience to have with bipolar disorder type 1, but it's manageable, right? And so I think that's not a very helpful when people suggest that. And all these myths that I mentioned in that chapter are all things that have been said to me. So yeah. So that's another one. Yeah.
It's amazing because, we started this by talking about, that it starts in utero, and, a few things happen in utero, right? You inherit certain genes that have been turned on in mom, and I've talked about some of those studies on the show, whether it's obesity genes that are turned on, whether it's mental illness genes that are turned on. We don't just inherit a gene and you're bipolar. Genes get triggered. The best news is that we can turn genes off when you remove the stressors, and it takes time to do that. And I interviewed a gentleman, a scientist, Michael Skinner, on the show, and we talked about generational toxicity affecting turning on genes. And he even said, when women get exposed, maybe it's the grandmother got exposed to a chemical like DDT, it skips a generation, or it partly affects something, turns it off in one generation, and then it's triggered the next generation. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. So, the old dogma of, well, you just have mental illness, you're going to pass it on to your kids. It's nonsense. I mean, we can minimize the stressors. We can turn off genes and not turn them on in the beginning. So, you know, science just now is really understanding that, you know, and I believe when you work on both brains, this brain and this brain, the second brain, you know, the microbiome, as you pointed out, plays a big role. You discovered that, you know, like I said, as you went through this, but oftentimes people forget about this brain. You know, in my talk, you know this, it's the lead and the mercury inherited by mom ends up here, you know, and again, it's like now we're waiting for his other triggers, other stressors. You talked a little bit about the stress, or, you know, even like I said, I mean, being adopted. Talk a little bit about some of the emotional stressors that, looking back, said, yeah, you know, this was part of the illness, the perfect storm of how I got here. I mean, whether it was from your mother in utero, after, through the adoption. I mean, what are some of these emotional traumas, if you will?
Well, so stress is a really big piece of this puzzle. And, you know, when I'm working with patients, I explain, you know, that there's these 4 aspects that we want to address: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. And when it comes to the physical, we have to understand that there's 3 macro systems that are involved, one of which is the neuroendocrine system, which includes the adrenal glands and the stress response system. So, so for myself, you know, it's even just comments from family members and little things. There wasn't a lot of, like, I had a really good childhood, but it was more that the way I perceived the world, you know, I grew up, my last name is Scandinavian. So my dad's side of where my family that adopted me, they're all blonde hair and blue eyes, a lot of them. And so I looked very different than everybody. And so, and even some family members, and this is sad, but someone said to my mom, well, blood is thicker than water. At which point my mom said, you know, this isn't, you cannot be saying that kind of thing around Christina. You know, she's a member of this family. Blood is not thicker than water. So comments like that make you feel less than, or I interpreted them to mean that I was less than. So there was some bullying in in elementary school. I moved in grade 3, and the girls at the school, they started an I Hate Christina club. That devastated me, just absolutely devastated me. But I'll tell you a cute little aside story. My son, when he came home in grade 2, he said the same thing. He said, Mom, these girls started an I Hate Noah club. And I said, and my heart just sank, right? I was like, oh. And then he said, oh, Mom, what are you worried about? No problem. Nobody joined, right? Nobody joined. I'm like, wow, that just highlights the difference between him. He has healthy self-esteem, and I did not have very good self-esteem.
Yeah.
So, and I think I overcompensated for that lack of self-love, self-esteem with overachieving, which hammered my adrenal glands. And when I look back on that crisis that I had in university, I think now, knowing what I know now, that was really first of all, I think an existential crisis, in the sense that I really didn't know what I wanted to be doing in the world. You know, I was taking a commerce degree just because my dad said that was a practical degree to do, but I didn't really know what I was doing there. And second of all, the stress, the pressure I put on myself to be number one was tough. And I see a lot of kids doing this nowadays, and parents doing this to their children as well. They're in so many things, and the kids, I think, are stressed now. So the stress piece, but other than that, I didn't really have a lot of, it was just more this self, just not loving myself. It just was there from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, but, you know, what were some of your breakthroughs? Because you have a free gift. I'll let you present it to our viewers and listeners. But you know, looking back, I mean, you have to heal that stuff. I mean, you have to deal with it. You have to acknowledge it to move on. It's part of the healing. Like you said, you can't just look at the physical, right? I mean, I'm an expert in removing the chemical aspect of the stressors that, you know, can turn on different illnesses. But talk about that.
Yeah. So, like I was saying, there's those 4 aspects: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And when it comes to mental health, most people are focused on the physical and mostly just on neurotransmitters. But what you have to understand is that the hormones of the neuroendocrine system, which consists of the hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, ovaries, adrenals, testes in men, every single gland that I just mentioned produces hormones, and imbalances in those hormones result in the symptoms of depression and anxiety and eating issues and sleeping issues, all of which can manifest as a mental illness.
Absolutely.
And then you also have the third macro system, which is what you've just mentioned, the organs of detoxification. So the way I support these macro systems is the foundation of health is diet, sleep, exercise, and then managing stress, which is a big piece of the puzzle. The next areas are looking at your thoughts, your emotions, how you behave and react in the world, the environment from 3 perspectives, yours, quality of the air, food, and water, epigenetics, right? Genes hold the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger, and neuroplasticity. You can change the way you think. And the last area is spirituality and wrapping it all up in love and compassion for yourself. I mean, I ask every patient on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love yourself? And not many give me an answer over 5. So for myself, what ended up happening was I started with that physical piece, right? Putting in place the supplements. Didn't change my diet. Then I went to medical school, had to analyze our diets, realized the only essential amino acid I was deficient in was tryptophan. Tryptophan goes to make serotonin, which is the mood neurotransmitter that everybody knows about for depression. And I was shocked that I was deficient in tryptophan. And the reason I did well was because Dr. Hoffer was supporting that pathway with the nutrients, the supplements he had given me. So I slowly started making changes to my diet, but all the while, never really looking at this mental, emotional, spiritual side. I had a faith-based background, so I very much believed that God wanted me still here on the planet, which is why that suicide attempt did not work.
Thank God.
But I have had 3 serious suicide attempts, not just the one. And so I started this inquiry into looking at my thoughts, which came about through another naturopathic doctor, Dr. Jason Hughes, who I owe a lot of credit to. He taught me how to manage my mind so that I wasn't at the mercy of my mind. And what people have to understand is you have your conscious thoughts that you're aware of, but you also have a subconscious mind.
Yeah, that's where the programming is.
Exactly. And this is what's driving the boat, right? This is what's driving the ship. And until you bring those unconscious commitments or shadow beliefs, so they call them, or your subconscious beliefs, conscious, then you will heal. But up until then, a lot of times people sabotage. Like, think of the person who, wants to lose 50 pounds and they lose 60, and then next year they gain 70, right? A lot of people have sabotaging beliefs at play. So I've had to really work through mine in order to, I think, heal. Or as I said, after I met you at the Bulletproof, I said, maybe I biohacked bipolar disorder. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, the subconscious is the recordings, right? That we start back from when we're kids, and most of those recordings under age of 5, it's like, but it's what sabotages everything, right? But if you don't dig it up out of your subconscious, then you can't change the conscious. Our thoughts become words, our words become actions, eventually actions become habits, habits become, ultimately our destiny. That's kind of the thing. So we have to change our thoughts, but the problem is some of those thoughts are, from these belief systems that are in that subconscious. Well, what's the free gift you have? Because it really deals in this area.
Okay. Yeah, the free gift is a forgiveness meditation. And because I really think if we're going to, heal ourselves, heal our family, and not only heal our friends and this planet, and we need to move into this forgiveness space and compassion space. And I think not to get political, but I just think, this is a really important piece. There should be no reason for war in this day and age.
It's like our beliefs do need changed. We can look at our life and look at our premises, the beliefs that we have, and go, oh, that's why we're here. I just ironically heard Will Smith yesterday talking about, I got into this discussion with my friend about fault versus responsibility, right? And it's like, because we often say, well, it was this fault, or this is the fault, this is why, right? We have excuses, we're blaming, right? Yeah. It's like when you're in that frame, man, you're not going to heal until you say, you know what? even though my father did this to me, it's my responsibility to choose a happy life. It's my responsibility. You know, it doesn't matter whose fault it was. It's our responsibility to change those beliefs. It's our responsibility to look at things differently, to change our way our mind works, to change our words, to change our actions, to change our, ultimately our destiny, right? And that's the cool. Yeah, we can rewind that. So how do they get the free gift?
So there'll be a link, I believe. I'll send you the link, and then they can just click on that, and away they go. And I really, I really hope people take this. It's really powerful, this exercise that I'm offering. It's really powerful. Yeah. So I hope people like it. And I know for me, forgiveness was a really big piece of my healing journey. And I just wanted to touch on too, just this idea about the thoughts. This is much more than thinking positive. I know there's a lot of people that are like, okay, and listen, I'd be quite a wealthy woman if I had $1 for every time somebody just told me just to snap out of it.
Yeah.
Just think positive. That'll solve everything.
We're always so easy.
Right? And I think what people have to understand is, and this is I teach a framework called the 7 R's of working with problematic thoughts. And what you want to understand is go from I am unworthy to I am worthy. That was too big of a jump. It didn't feel authentic because I truly didn't think that I was worthy.
Yeah.
So I teach patients to just go, instead of I am unworthy to I am, just go I am, with no descriptive label, very neutral. And that takes you into that neutral space. You're not beating, because this is the thing, what people have to understand. Your thoughts affect your physiology. Your thoughts you think affect the cascade of hormones that get produced in your body. So if you want to change how you feel, you have to change how you think, but it's not just about thinking positive. So, I mean, yes, don't get me wrong. Absolutely. It's taken me, I'm 51. It's taken me probably 50 years to look at the glass as half empty or half full. See, I even just said it subconsciously, half empty.
Well, you said it. I've interviewed Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief, on this a couple of times, and he showed, right, our thoughts become who we are, right? Our thoughts are picked up vibrationally, literally by our cells. That changes the DNA, which changes the RNA, which changes the proteins, meaning the hormones, who we are. It's who we are, and it becomes who we are. So our thoughts, our words, it becomes who we are. But you're right. If I could just, think positive, no, it absolutely doesn't work that way. So you've offered them some steps. Thank you. That's going to help, no doubt about it. So let's talk about what are some of the, you said you started with some supplements. I mean, what are some of the ones that actually really helped you?
Yeah.
And, then we'll talk about diet.
Yeah, I actually laminated the prescription from Dr. Hoffer. That's how important it was for me. So and this is where the essential diet is really a great resource for people as well. Because here's the thing you have to understand, there are essential nutrients. So what that means is you cannot make them, right? In the current version of the human being, we cannot make these essential things. We have to get them from our diets. So the essential nutrients there's essential omega-3s that are really important, essential amino acids, so tryptophan. Now, I don't start with tryptophan. Some people do, but I don't prescribe tryptophan because tryptophan can go in one of 3 directions in the body. First and foremost, to make vitamin B3, because it's used in every single cell of the body to produce ATP, which is the energy currency we need. However, if you are under stress, which a lot of us are, and I know I was, tryptophan will get tripped to go down, which is what is called the chymeric pathway, to make quinolinic acid, which contributes to depression. The third pathway tryptophan can go down that we want it to go down is to make serotonin and then melatonin. So the pathway is tryptophan, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin.
So and before you leave that, I have to ask you, today we have just an epidemic of glyphosate, is the chemical in the herbicide Roundup and others, and it's being sprayed everywhere. I mean, they say 60% of the rainfall has it. That interferes with the shikimate pathway that you make what you're just describing. We have certain bacteria that help us make tryptophan, which then goes down that pathway you just described to serotonin. So I know Stephanie Seneff, who I've interviewed on the show, she talks about how glyphosate is basically depleting the bacteria, and now we're not making enough tryptophan. What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
which is leading to an epidemic. I mean,
Yeah.
my gosh. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this, you know, and this is the thing. People really have to understand that everything you put in your body informs your body in one way or another. So this glyphosate problem is huge. It's a huge problem. I don't even know why Wonder Bread is still in business. This white bread, Wonder Bread. I mean, there's nothing nutrition. There's no nutritional value in that whatsoever.
Anti-nutrition.
Yeah, so it's a very important. It's very important. Very important. So this pathway, these various pathways in the body, it's not just as simple as going from tryptophan to 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin. There's also what's called cofactors, nutritional cofactors that you need each step of the way. So if you don't have those, you're not going to make it to serotonin, right? So for myself, these cofactors are very important. So vitamin C, zinc, iron is part of it, B5, and vitamin B6. Now, the other thing about nutrients you have to understand is there's certain forms of these nutrients that are better than others. So, for example, the form of B6 we would prefer in the form of pyridoxal 5-phosphate. The form of folate or folic acid we would prefer in the form of 5-methyltetrahydrofolate. So this is why it's really important to work with a naturopathic doctor or somebody who has an understanding of nutrition, because it's not just about taking taking supplements. It's taking the right form of the nutrient and the right dose of the nutrient as well, and making sure that there's non-medicinal ingredients that aren't harmful in that product. I had a woman bring me a garlic oil that she was taking. You know, you would think garlic oil, that's pretty innocent. And in the non-medicinal ingredients was a trans-hydrogenated fat. Why would that should not be there? So the quality of what you decide to take, if you're going to go and take supplements, is very important, very important. Yeah. So those are some of the essential nutrients. Vitamin D is another important nutrient as well for mental health.
Right? I mean, it's a pro-hormone. So people like it. I mean, we know. I mean, seasonal affective disorder, just showing people the relationship. People don't get enough sun. They're not making enough vitamin D. They fall into depression. That happens to a lot of people, by the way. And they just don't know. They end up taking medication during the winter. They're really not putting it together that they may just be lacking the hormone vitamin D.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So, I mean, I offer a 10-week online course that walks people through all the 10 steps that I talk about in Beyond the Label, but in more depth than in the book is a great place to start. And it's a wonderful resource for anybody who has any kind of mental health, well, not any mental health condition, but the mental health conditions that I've gone through, which is a lot. So, so I hope people will, check it out, because I think it is an epidemic.
No, I believe so. And where can they find you? Just give your website.
So it's Dr. and then Christina and then my last name, Bjorndal.com, or my clinic is naturalterrain, TERRAIN.com. So those are the two places. But listen, I wanted to mention this too really quickly as well. Sorry, I was just going to say that when we were talking about this epidemic, I was speaking with Dr. James Greenblatt. He's an integrated psychiatrist or integrative medicine psychiatrist. And he said that by the year 2030, a person globally every second will commit suicide. So you think about that's a staggering number. And so in my mind, we do have a silent epidemic going on. Yes. And my whole goal here is to try to save souls from suicide. I mean, I understand this. I've been there. I get it. It's not an easy place to be when you don't feel like you want to be here on the planet, but there are resources available. There are helplines. There are people who want to help you. And so if you are a listener and you are struggling, or you know a family member that's struggling, this is so important to reach out, because it's just so unnecessary, the rates to be this high. So I just wanted to add that.
An attack from the enemy itself. This young generation, as we call the millennials, I really fear for them. It's because they start medicating young. And again, there's a time and a place. We said that. and there's a time where it actually works. But see, without these things that you're talking about, you're not getting to upstream causes. It doesn't work. It doesn't work long term. And then you're on the treadmill, and you end up getting thrown off the back. Today, generation, I mean, they're getting thrown many psychotropic drugs at a young age. They're getting Adderall. Then they're bringing everything down with marijuana. I mean, I see this balancing act. According to my kids, Dad, you have to understand, most of my friends are on medication, which is the psychotropics actually lead the way, of what they're taking. So, I fear for this generation when they hit their 30s. I do. And suicide numbers are on the rise massively. We have an epidemic with glyphosate, which is affecting the shikimate pathway, which is affecting the neurotransmitters our brain needs. Then we have a diet today that's absolutely horrific. I mean, my generation, come on, we ate home-cooked meals.
That's right.
90% of the time, right? We didn't have the soils depleted. Like, we didn't have the herbicides like they do today, and the pesticides, the glyphosate. I mean, I'm telling you, it is a recipe for disaster. I mean, it is. Absolutely. Talk about some of the dietary breakthroughs that really helped you, because that was went to the supplements, but then the diet stuff was big for you. I mean, in your book, you talk about sugar, but kind of reflect on that.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to add one point as well, just to mention, traditionally in the past, bipolar disorder wasn't diagnosed generally, or didn't come out or manifest until you were in your later teens, early 20s. That's generally when bipolar disorder would first manifest. Now they're diagnosing children at the age of 5 with bipolar disorder. And first, for the listeners to understand, there's 2 types. There's type 1, which is the type that I've been experienced, I'll just say, and then there's type 2, and one has psychosis, the other doesn't. I just disagree fundamentally with that, and that's why some of these children are being put on psychotropic meds. And here's the other thing: we study these medications in isolation, but we don't study polypharmacy. But in the field, it's polypharmacy. Like you were saying, they're on Adderall, they're probably on Ativan, they're taking a sleeping pill, they're on an antidepressant, then they're on a mood stabilizer, and they're doing marijuana, right? Yeah. This is not how it is studied in the clinical trials. So I think that's another big thing. But in terms of myself, so, when you go to naturopathic school, there's a lot of people there that are doing the right thing. So eating my canned Campbell's soup and my baked potato wasn't going to cut it anymore, right? So I had to sort of learn to cook. This is something that I was very blessed with, a mother who could rival Martha Stewart any day. So I didn't learn how to cook. And my mom today, she joked, she's like, yeah, that was a real downfall. That was a real mistake. I should have made you learn how to cook. I was so busy studying and overachieving that I didn't have time to cook. And that was my mom's, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So that was an amazing cook. So I had a really good foundation for cooking, for my nutrition as a child. But when I moved out, that's where it all fell apart. I lived in my apartment for 8 years and I never used my oven, not once. So I did not know how to cook. You have to teach your children how to cook, and that's something that I often prescribe my patients. Take a cooking class. Cooking is actually fun, right? And here's the thing. So that was such a great thing at naturopathic school, because there was always lots of community potlucks. And so I learned to try new things. And my gosh, when my naturopath asked me to cut out wheat, dairy, sugar, eggs, tomatoes, and chocolate, I didn't even know there was another grain out there other than wheat and rice, right? I didn't know what quinoa was. I couldn't say it, couldn't spell it, couldn't pronounce it. So there's a whole world out there for people to explore. And this should be a huge priority, I think, in people's lives. And we've sacrificed home cooking with convenience and time, right? We've using all our time running our kids around, and we're not making cooking a priority. Right. And so then we eat out. And you have to understand that the food industry, including when you go out to eat, manipulates food with 3 molecules: sugar, fat, and salt. So, I talk about sugar a lot because that's the biggest battle I have is with this sugar piece. I think because of the candida that came about as a result of the the antibiotics in teenage years. And then the eating disorder, which was like, sugar was like a drug to me. Like, honestly, it was like I would consume it and I would feel an instant You know, honestly, it was like this
Well, yeah,
hooking me up, you know.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
So
and you know, many kids today, I mean, they survive on one sugar drink to the next, and it's a little more cocktail than that. It's caffeine, it's sugar, and it's
yeah,
excitotoxins, all in one
yeah.
convenient drink that you can buy at any convenience store. So, I mean, and this becomes the reality. You know, I'm telling you,
Why are these
what I
products allowed? You know, why are these products even allowed?
it's unbelievable. And, you know, most of the focus is on the wrong things. I mean, you know, you know, when we talk about brain function, you know, I used to do a piece on 102 days of dysfunction. You know, everything when we're eating out there has vegetable oils. I mean, we went
Right.
beyond trans fats, but vegetable oils do the same thing in the body. They make their way right into the cell because the omega-6 is critical for the cell membrane function. And these are adulterated. They go in, and these adulterated omega-6s interfere with the membrane. Now
Yeah.
you're interfering with every hormone we're talking about,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's so vital to avoid all of these things. When you go in Whole Foods, it's canola oil and vegetable oil in most of the products. You have to know what the heck you're doing to avoid these rancid, you know, adulterated fats that just disrupt the membrane. And it's very difficult to get the proper omega-6. You know, there's two essential fatty acids, right? The linoleic acid and the alpha linoleic acid.
Yeah, that's right.
And the fixing people, the omega-6 actually plays a more important role. I just did a video on this, and we talked about brain function. And it's I think the title is The Dangers of Fish Oil to people who are taking rancid fish oil.
Yeah, that's right.
Problems,
Well,
yeah.
and the other thing though, with if we mentioned, like you mentioned canola oil, the other thing with that is that's the #1 genetically modified food as well. So you have to make sure that the canola you're consuming is organic canola.
I mean, look at all the pitfalls these kids have, right? The corn oil, that's GMO too, sprayed with glyphosate. It's the wrong fat for the brain. I mean, in the membranes. I mean, come on. I mean, this is unbelievable. I mean, we have to get the message out. You know, I can't believe how fast our time went. You know, people, we need to hear. Look, I mean, you made the dietary stuff simple. I mean, your essential diet for mental illness. I mean, that became a book in itself that people can just buy. They can get it on site. I'm probably Amazon, and then Beyond the Label has, you know, that in it as well. But a lot of the things that we were discussing, you know,
10 steps.
You know, listen, you've definitely gone beyond the label, and you know, this is an important topic. You know, we need to share this, folks watching. Share this with your friends. I'm telling you, because you know what's funny is many people watching this, their lives, there's people around them that they know very well that are hiding this, that, you know, like you did, right? You were told not to tell anyone. So, you know, I'm telling you, share this with as many people as you can, because you don't realize, you know, how many people are actually suffering, and they just don't want you to know because they hate themselves for it. God forbid you know. So
1 in 4, 1 in 4.
1 in 4. Last word.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think my last words are to just understand that you are here for a reason. And even if it feels like you don't know what that reason is, the more that you can learn to connect from your heart and to live from a heart-centered place, the better off that you will be in your life, and to learn to trust that there is an order to things, and that you are meant to be here. And I say to a lot of my patients, I know we talk about mental illness as it's a mental problem. I actually think it's also a heart problem. I was going to call my book A Call for Love, because I think at the end of the day, this is what it's all about. How do you feel about you and the person that's beside you, and whether you can extend love and grace is really what it's all about. Yeah. So yeah, diet's important, but loving yourself is important, right?
No, I agree, and that goes back to the you know, the free gift, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Part, you know, the forgiveness. You know, I mean, because that's what stands in the way oftentimes. So take advantage of it. Thank you for that, by the way, because I love shows that give people an action step. I do, because otherwise we just go, wow, oh yeah, they're right, and there's no action step. So the action step, get the free gift. So thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yeah. Thanks for being on, Dr. Chris. No doubt. You're a wealth of knowledge in this area. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.